to For He's a Jolly Good Fellow, a celebration of Robert Burns' birthday, and also a celebration of our 2011 Burns Fellow, Fiona Farrell, and of the winners of the Robert Burns Poetry Competition for this year. First of all, I'd like to thank Bruce Spittle and the Dunedin Burns Club for their hard work, sponsorship and contribution to this competition, and for keeping the spirit of Robert Burns alive and well in Dunedin. I'd like to also thank Professor Liam McElbenny, who can't be with us today unfortunately, he's teaching at the summer school, from the University of Otago for his help in rejuvenating the Robert Burns Poetry Competition, and his kind donation of the book Robert Burns and Pastoral for our winning published poet. I'd also like to thank the Burns Fellowship at the University of Otago for providing opportunities and supporting the development of talented New Zealand writers. I'd like to thank Murray Kirkness and Tom McKinlay and the team at the Otago Daily Times for their generous support of the competition. If you get the Otago Daily Times tomorrow, the winning poets will be published in the arts page. I'd also like to thank Maureen Collins from the Dunedin Public Libraries for painstakingly loading all the entries for the competition as they came in, to the Tyree Pipe Band for sponsoring a CD of their music for the winners to enjoy, to Fiona Farrell for agreeing to judge the Robert Burns Poetry Competition alongside Michael Harlow, and for joining us today to share her experiences as the 2011 Burns Fellow. And last but not least, to everyone who took part in the poetry competition across the country. We have an apology from Michael Harlow, who was the 2009 Burns Fellow, who has helped to judge the Robert Burns competition for the past 2 years and is currently up in Auckland enjoying his time as the Wallace Writer in residence. He's very sorry that he can't be with us today. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Fiona Farrell and welcome her.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here in my final week as the Burns Fellow. I don't know if this was planned or not, but the Burns Fellowship runs from February the 1st to February the 1st each year. So this has been perfectly timed, perfectly judged. I'm going to talk a little bit about my Burns year. Annette asked if I would just talk a little bit about that before we move on to the important business, which is the poetry and the prize winners of this year's Robert Burns Poetry Competition. It's safe to say that it is not the year that I thought I was going to have when I applied for it in June 2010. What I'd planned was a quiet retreat to Dunedin. It was going to be a kind of return. This is where my mother's family are from. I biked past them up in the North Cemetery every morning. John and Jane Grant and various other members of the family who were buried up there and who came out in the early days to settle here. My mother lived on Clyde Street, and it felt very much like a return home. But I was planning a quiet year. I was going to write a novel, I was going to be at the university, I was going to be away for a spell from living at the end of a gravel road on Banks Peninsula at Tanarito. Everyone thinks that living at the end of a gravel road in a quiet little place is a wonderful place to be to write. And it is in many ways. But you also need input, you need conversations, and you need the kind of experiences that cities give. And that's what I was looking forward to when I came down here. I thought, I'll meet lots of new people. I'll have lots of new experiences, I'll browse the galleries and I'll go to the libraries. And I will just have a year, a kind of reverse retreat. I'd have a retreat to the city rather than a retreat to the country. And then in September, we were staying at our flat in town. We had a little flat in the middle of the city. Or rather, we had a little flat in the middle of the city on the corner of Hagley Park. And we were shaken from our beds, and everything's changed really. So this year's been a strange one. I've been down in Dunedin, I've been working here, and I have loved working here, and I have done all the things I thought I would do. I've met some wonderful people, some of whom I see here in the audience today. I've had some wonderful conversations, gone to the libraries, used this library, this wonderful resource that you have here in Dunedin. doubly wonderful now that libraries in Christchurch are closed. You realise what a wonderful resource a terrific library can be. And I've done all the things I wanted to do. I've written, I've produced a book. I didn't write the novel that I set out to do, which was going to be a murder novel. I decided I'd try a murder story. It was going to be set in a small New Zealand town. I've lived near Akaroa for 20 years, and there's nothing like living in a small New Zealand town to make you start fantasising about knocking off a sizable proportion of the population. I was thinking of a murder novel, set somewhere picturesque, and but I haven't written that in the event. The quake changed everything, and I found myself living here in a little flat up in Okaho, but phoning home, hearing my husband, who sounds shaken after there'd been another night of shocks and quakes and the rest of it, and feeling divided, feeling split, as though I had to be in two places at once. I gather from him that we've had, on an average, an aftershock every 4 hours of 3 plus since September the 4th, 2010. So that puts the whole thing into perspective. It also makes cities very valuable. You do really love cities for what they are, and Dunedin is included. I found myself driving across the Waitaki and sort of going in between two places. I would drive south into the land that was my birthplace, Oamaru, and where I grew up, around Merton, Waikawaiati, Oamaru, Dunedin, where all these people are still around, all these people that I remember. And then driving north, when I did go home, I went home 2 or 3 times, back to a place which had shaken to pieces. I actually wrote a poem about it, and I thought I'd read that by way of introduction, just to try and explain that feeling I had of being in two places. It's about going over the bridge on the Waitaki, and it's called Photo Opportunity. I was thinking of those bus trips where you're on a little bus and you have to stop and take photos. As we approach the river of forgetfulness, you will notice a slight acceleration. On your left, the garage and the motor camp. On your right, a thicket of blackberry, the berry's blood thorn under the skin. Do not adjust your headset. Do not open the windows. Grey braid of river silt, the lupin's yellow throat. Take out your cameras now. There will be an opportunity as we cross the river of forgetfulness. We will pull over. On the south bank, shadows cluster. On the north bank, bone and rubble. Upriver, the lips of the gorge, the narrow source. Downriver is dispersal and the dump and seabirds weeping. There are exits here and here. They have been sealed for your security. Do not adjust your aperture. And now we are on our way. We have crossed the whatchamacallit, and we're heading fast toward Thingamabob. Emma Neal very kindly published that poem in the ODT as one of her choices for the week. The work I've managed to do this year has been influenced by that event. It can't avoid that. The first thing I did was finish off a series of essays about walking. I love walking. It's one of my great pleasures. I walk around Okaho and adore it. I walk down through the gardens. I like walking as recreation. My husband and I, when we can, spend winters walking. We live in a little bay on Banks Peninsula, and he has a tourist business. He has an accommodation for walkers on the Banks Peninsula track. We have to be there, well, he has to be there from October till the end of April, but in the winters we're free. We don't earn any money, but on the other hand nobody needs anything from us, and for 5 months we can do what we like. So we go walking in New Zealand we go walking overseas if we can afford it, spend all our money. We haven't got a penny to our names, but we've had some wonderful experiences. So I was writing a travel book. I've been asked to do one by Auckland University Press. They thought that travel suited me. I'd done some notes for a poetry book which I'd written in Ireland, and at the back of the book I'd put little travel notes about the experiences that had generated the poems. And my editor said, why don't you write a travel book? You obviously enjoy travel, you enjoy the observations, the conversations, so try a travel book. I've never written non-fiction. I'm a fiction writer and a poet, and I write plays and libretti and things like that. So non-fiction felt a bit scary. It felt like stepping out from behind the facade that you have when you're writing a novel. I can write about things that I believe in personally in a novel, but if anyone questions it, I can always say, oh no, it's just fiction. It's not me, it's not my family, it's not what really happened, it's not what I really think, it's what the fictional character believes. But in non-fiction, you're exposed, so it felt quite, I felt quite nervous about it really, but also found it incredibly pleasurable. And that's what I had been doing last year, in 2000, the year before last, in 2010, before I came down to Dunedin. I'd been writing essays about walking in France. One essay that I'd been writing was about walking with my little granddaughter who lives on Blacks Road in Okaho, walking down Baldwin Street, which is where they had lived previously in a flat, to the gardens in Dunedin. And I was well on the way to writing this travel book when the quake hit. And for a while I kept on writing these essays about France or Britain or wherever, as though nothing was happening. I'd be sitting at my desk at Tanarito, and I'd see the paddock begin to ripple, this sort of wave that comes towards you, and I'd hear the roar, and then the shock would hit, and I'd wait for it to settle, and then I'd carry on writing as though nothing was happening. And it became increasingly ridiculous. How could I possibly be ignoring this thing that was happening? So I decided that I would write poems. It's my way of keeping track of the everyday, of the particular that's happening in my life. So I produced a book in my first couple of months here. I wrote like a demon. I felt that time was limited. I think partly because of the quake. I felt an incredible pressure to make best use of the time. You know, people can just disappear in an instant. In 15 seconds they can disappear. So I felt this incredible pressure to do what I had to do and to do it now. So I worked like crazy over at the university in that lovely office that they give you, and up in my little flat in Okaho. And I produced this book. It isn't just about walking in France, or walking in Britain or wherever. It's a book where every 3 or 4 pages there's a poem. I wanted it to be about the process that had gone into writing the book as well as the book itself. So every 3 or 4 pages in the middle of these essays is a little squiggle, which is actually the seismographic data for one of the aftershocks, which a very clever graphic artist at Auckland University Press intercepted into the text. And then there's a poem which is about the quake or something to do with the quake, and then we carry on as though nothing's happened with the tale of the walk. That book came out in October, and it felt wonderful to have a book that was actually done during the time that I was here in Dunedin on the Burns year. I feel as though I've achieved something. There was something concrete. I can actually hold it up and wave it about and feel pleased that it's here. The other thing that I have been working on this year was I finished off a play which I've been working on, which is based on a rather dreadful Ngaio Marsh novel. It was my sort of murder story, I suppose. I used a Ngaio Marsh story which is set in the high country and features an Italian opera singer and various other very unlikely characters gathered in a high country lodge. And I've done that, and it's presently going to be workshopped later this year at the court in Christchurch. I'm hoping that Lara McGregor at Fortune might also take it. And I've also worked on a libretto. The Mozart Fellow this year is Chris Evans, as all of you will know, presumably, the most remarkable and gifted composer. He's utterly extraordinary. I gave him a libretto. He asked if I would collaborate with him when I first arrived here last year. So I said, yes, I'd love to. I love writing libretti. I love working with musicians. And we worked together on a chamber opera. I wrote a libretto about, it's a whodunit, a kind of radio drama whodunit, come chamber opera. And if I try to describe it, it will sound utterly confused and slightly mad, but I think it's going to be quite marvellous. We're in rehearsal this week. In fact, I'm going back to Allen Hall in an hour or so, and we walk through the opera with some singers. We've received funding very generously from Creative New Zealand and from the University of Otago's Performing Arts Fund, and we're going to do a workshop. We've done a workshop this week, and on Saturday night we're going to have a small performance of it in Allen Hall. And I'm hoping that it might be taken up by one of the festivals and produced properly somewhere. It's been enormous fun working with Chris. I've really loved that. And that's been one of the other great pluses of being in Dunedin, is having access to other people who want to work with me on things. I've also written some poems. I've been keeping track of my life here in Dunedin in a little tapa book. These are given out by Auckland University Library. They're making a collection of tapa books which they give to various writers around New Zealand to fill up with whatever they like. I think it's a wonderful idea, and I think other libraries ought to pick it up. And you can scribble in these little books and put in anything you like, and at the end of a year it's given to the library and put into their archives. And they're now assembling quite a collection of handwritten books by New Zealand's writers, which is quite wonderful. So I've been filling mine. It's called On the Burns. I always think it's rather funny the way people always talk about being on the burns, as though it's a sort of gaslight or something. It sounds rather uncomfortable. And I do little scribbles and little diary entries, just about odd things like losing all my money in the being sucked into one of those automatic teller things at the New World and by the Gardens. So I've been using this as a way of keeping track of my year. I can say it's been the most wonderful and stimulating and exciting year. And I plan to keep a toehold down here in Dunedin. I don't want to leave it again. I should have to go back to Tanarito. I can't leave my husband going through aftershocks on his own. But I want to keep a toehold down here. I think the things, I really want to make some thank yous. This is my chance as my final week here to thank various people really and various institutions. I'd like to thank you, Lynette, and the other people here at the library for the resources that you provide to us and the wonderful collection that you've built up. It's the most amazing resource and open at all hours. It's the most amazing facility. I want to thank all the people that I've met and talked to this year. I've had some wonderful conversations, interesting and exciting conversations. I'd like to thank the colleagues in the English department. The English department at Otago is a wonderful department. It still retains a classical English training, which has been given up in many other places. At Canterbury, the University English department is now down to 8 people, only one of whom can teach, I'm told, pre-1900 literature. It's been progressively reduced by an unsympathetic administration, and I don't care that I'm saying that in public. I think it's really quite shocking what's happened here. But Otago retains its department, and the fellows are made welcome every Friday morning to this wonderful institution which Michael Harlow had told me about, a coffee morning. At about 10:30 everyone stops work and they gather round the secretary's desk and a coffee urn and they chat and talk. for an hour or so every Friday morning, and it's the most wonderful thing to do. You meet lots of people, you have wonderful conversations. The department's been amazingly friendly and welcoming. I'd like to thank Professor Lynn Trimble and all the other people, Professor Liam McElvany, all the other people that I've met through that. I'd like to thank the Fortune Theatre. Lara McGregor is the most amazing director. I got a season ticket to the Fortune when I first arrived in Dunedin, and I haven't regretted it once. I've had a wonderful experience once a month going to the theatre and seeing a new production. I taught Lara when she was about 5 or 6 years old in a little drama class that I started in Palmerston North when I got back from Toronto, way back in 1976 or 77. And here she is directing one of New Zealand's premier theatres and doing a wonderful job of it. So it's been a real delight being able to go to the Fortune Theatre. I've enjoyed going to the launches of poems and books by friends. I've been to launches for Sue Wooden's new book of poetry, wonderful collection. Owen Marshall's Larnac, which is just the most wonderful telling of the story, a kind of fictionalised version of that story that I can remember as a child visiting Larnac's castle before it became all titivated, and it was this rather grim and spooky place. My mother knew someone who had some association with the building, and I can remember walking through it. It was completely dusty and empty and very baronial and spooky, one of the great memories of my life on a foggy day with all the macabres creaking around it. But Owen catches that atmosphere brilliantly in the book and brings the whole place to life. Rhiannon Gallagher's wonderful collection of poems too. I've been very fortunate in being able to be here when those books have come out. I love that feeling of going to a launch and seeing the book brand new in the author's hands and reading it for the first time. I think it's the most exciting moment. And finally, judging the Burns poetry competition. Perfect timing. I hope that this is a tradition that will be maintained, that the Burns Fellow ends their Burns year being associated in some way with the Burns competition. It was a very exciting competition to read. It's very different from an open poetry competition because it has this focus on Scotland's premier poet and on the character of that poet as well. So reading the poems has been a very interesting and very different kind of experience, and a very archetypally Dunedin experience. So thank you, Dunedin.
Thank you so much, Fiona. That was wonderful. We are now in the second part of our event for the prize giving for the 2012 Robert Burns Poetry Competition. Fiona is going to present the prizes, and unfortunately one of our winners can't be with us today, so you're going to have to forgive me. I'm going to be attempting some Scots and I'll be reading her poem on her behalf. So the first medal that we'll be giving out is the Stan Kirkpatrick Medal, which is awarded to the winning published poet. The late Stan Kirkpatrick joined the Dunedin Burns Club for a period after serving with the Merchant Navy, including being on convoys to northern Russia. He later moved in 1952 to Southland and helped to start a Burns Club there. He helped popularise haggis ceremonies in Dunedin, including the poem addressed to a haggis. The works of Burns held a special place in his heart. So for third place, published poet, we would like to present a certificate to Beverly Martins for What More Could You Wish For?
Taking over reading the names now. Second place to a poem which is not about a haggis, but which riffs on the idea of the haggis in the most entertaining and wonderfully different and individual way. Calvin Fowler's The Chief Chieftain.
Calvin lives in Lithuania at the while he's over there doing mission work at the moment. And this morning he rang up and says, "Mum, can you go to the library and collect my certificate and make sure it is through to him by this evening?" So here I am.
Congratulations, Calvin.
And first place for the published poets goes to a poem which again makes a riff on one of Burns's most famous poems, "My Love is Like a Red, Red Rose." It's a wonderfully inventive, contemporary retelling of that poem, retaining the mood of the original. It's Lynn Hill's My Squeeze. Like a queen.
Thank you. And then just like to read the poem?
I might say that I was a little nervous about this one, but because I thought it was too contemporary. So here we go. It's called My Squeeze. My squeeze is like an orchid, original though, one of a kind. She's like heavy metal that clangs upon the mind. I won't say I love you, that's a dangerous word, but I'm okay to say you're my best ever bird. We're already an item, let's hope it continues on. Can this relationship survive once I am gone? Say, see ya, now we must walk alone. Send me many emails to read. Text and I'll come to you, my dear, no matter how many air points I need.
And we now come to the Alan Miller Memorial Trophy and Medal, which is awarded to the unpublished poet. The late Alan J. Miller was the president of the Dunedin Burns Club from 1959 until 1961, and together with his wife Flora was a strong supporter of the club. He became a patron of the club, a position he held until his death, and he remembered the club in his bequest. Keeping alive the work of Burns was extremely important to him.
Third place, to a poem which has a strong political ring to it. It felt to me, and to Michael, I shouldn't speak just for myself, this has been a discussion with Michael Harlow at every step of the way. It felt to us like a poem that echoed Burns's own feelings and his sense of independence and the value of the ordinary person and the ordinary working man. So it's to Dictate the Silver Salmon.
Thank you very much.
Second place goes to a poem which has that strong sense of place that permeates Burns's own poetry. It's the poem The Road to Portobello by Gary Richard Johnston. First place goes to a poem which took up that theme of drink, of alcohol, and then did something very different with it. Did something very individual, very independent. We thought it was a wonderful poem, and that first place award goes to Sandra Jones for Laura in Drink, She's not here today, so Lydia's going to read the poem. I think in impeccable Scots.
No pressure. I must admit, when this poem came in, I was quite touched by it, because it can often be a little bit difficult to write about something that's not necessarily all sweetness and light. And I thought that was incredibly brave, and the more I read it, the more it opens up. So I'm still learning this poem and its subtleties. It's very hard to read a poem that's written partially in Scots without lapsing into a terrible Scottish accent, so I'll apologise for that. For Laura in drink. My Laura was a bonny lass. I waved her off across the sea. But she came hame, my daughter dear, a poor damn drinker she, and nae hae I but grief and pain for promised joy. Now I've been blithe with friends so dear, and I've been canted drinking, but stopping wail before the yill has made me downfallen. But nae hae I but grief and pain for promised joy. But Laura now grates your lug, and picks up doubts frae off the streets, and lets you fill her glass or jug until she yearns, until she greets. And nae hae I but grief and pain for promised joy. Poor lassie, my fair Laura kens her lot of care and sorrows, but wine's a deep and loving friend, oh aye, until the morrow. And nae hae I but grief and pain for promised joy. The bottle's bought, she carefully hides, she'll close the door and loving the moment caught, cares cast aside, the glass full to brimming. But nae hae I but grief and pain for promised joy. That dale drink, fair I would slay it, my bonny lass, how to save ye. Fain I would hear from her lips dropped, nah, nae meb drink for me. But nae hae I but grief and pain for promised joy. So thank you so much for coming this lunchtime. Thank you so much to Fiona Farrell, who's actually been such a gift over 12 months. You've been incredibly generous with your time and your contribution to our community here. So yes, if you're going to keep a toehold, we'll be very happy. And thank you again to everybody who helps to make Robert Burns Poetry Competition such a success. And thank you to all your support as well. It's so heartwarming to see a great crowd coming to listen and to celebrate with us all. So enjoy the rest of your day. Have a wonderful Robert Burns birthday. And I hope that we will see you at some of the other celebrations. Thank you.